Thomas the Tank Engine follows the story of Thomas and many other steam engines going about their daily lives on the Isle of Sodor. Started off as a book series and eventually became a TV series that's still running to this day. Now, after watching many of these episodes, people have begun to ask, is the Fat Controller fascist? And I just want to put my 2 cents onto this issue.
Then along came Sir Topham Hatt, the man in charge of all the engines on Sodor. They call him the Fat Controller.
First of all, what is fascism? It's important to define fascism because it's one of the most misused terms in modern discourse. If we look at people like Mussolini, Hitler, Franco, they're not identical. So we will need to look at things that possibly have in common, just to know some of the key tenets of fascism. Among those we have authoritarianism, ultranationalism, suppression of political opponents, need for strong leadership, vertical hierarchies, anti-union, using violence to achieve political ends. Some may also say there is a cult-like following behind fascism. People like Mussolini and Hitler both are indistinguishable from the regimes that they were behind. Authoritarian. There's a bit of a clue in the name that he's the controller, so he would definitely have some element of authoritarian in him. And to be a leader and someone in charge, you have to have a level of authority and controlling in that context. So it fits that part, but I wouldn't say that necessarily makes him a fascist. Ultranationalism, I don't think there's any evidence to say that he is an ultranationalist. Maybe a patriot. He may like his country, but that doesn't necessarily mean that he is fascist. Looking at the ultranationalists of Britain, I don't think he fits that sort of mould, so to speak. What about the suppression of political opponents? The Fat Controller isn't necessarily a political figure, so I don't think opponents like that would necessarily exist, but he definitely has the vertical top-down hierarchy that when it comes to the rail network, he is the one who has the final say on anything. So the vertical hierarchy does apply in this context.
Everyone pulled except the Fat Controller, because, he said, my doctor has forbidden me to pull.
We look when he punished Henry for not wanting to get his coat wet, bless him. He's like, no, we're going to brick you up in there, now you're going to have your punishment. The narrative frames it as if it was a good thing.
But I think he deserved his punishment, don't you?
Where, I'm sorry, but if your boss decides to brick you up in the toilet because it feels you haven't done your job well, I think that was a bit messed up. Yeah, definitely call the union on that. Do the engines have unions? I don't think they do. The engines aren't given the same agency as humans are. They're almost considered property. And when they end their lives, then they are scrapped, which is deemed to be a punishment. Those that aren't towing the line, so to speak, they are promptly dealt with, which, yeah, which ties back to the common phrase, really useful engine.
You and your station will be really useful, said the Fat Controller.
If they're not useful to the state, they're promptly dealt with as well.
But no matter what we look like, we'll always be useful, won't we, Thomas? Of course, their friend replied.
Mussolini made the trains run on time. I think it's fair to say the Fat Controller did as well. Going back to the whole scrapping trains thing, it's almost as if there's two classes of workers. You've got the people driving the trains and you've got those who are the trains. Two different classes of people. This isn't necessarily fascism, but this definitely rings true of apartheid. Segregations of people by denying the engines of full autonomy. All I'm saying is, have you ever seen an unemployed train in Thomas the Tank Engine? It's very rare, isn't it? I don't think it's just the Fat Controller. The system existed long before him. That doesn't make it better, but as stated before, the Fat Controller isn't a politician, so he's not going to run for election or enact policies that may affect people, but he does directly control the engines. He's basically their dictator. Where he stands politically, I don't think was addressed really. I mean, What would he think about the privatising of the railways back in, I think, 1993? In conclusion, I don't think he is a fascist, but I think the best allegory I would have would be a slave owner owning autonomous and sentient beings while using them for a purpose and denying them autonomy, which would make one of the most famous TV series from our childhood to be more of a dystopia. I mean, nothing new there really, is there? Thank you very much for watching. I hope you liked it, and if you did, subscribe.